Hello and welcome to today's edition of the most active tickers in the US stock market, brought to you by Bootleg Macro. We're going to take a look at Riot here. Riot was up 15.5% today, but let's really ask the question of how did we get here? During 2020, we saw that it had a low in March, like all the stocks did. It had a really high peak essentially in February of 2021. If you watch my Tilray video that I posted a little bit earlier today, it shows the exact same pattern. Essentially, it peaked, everything peaked in the beginning of 2021. We went sideways for a little bit, and then essentially we've been down into 2022. It looks like we bottomed here at the very end of 2022, and we may be resuming a bullish move. We can see here again, this is essentially the daily, but is a indication of what we saw here on the weekly. We see that it bottomed at the very beginning of 2022. It's been up and to the right ever since 2023. Now, looking at the bullish sentiment on the daily here, this is going to give a percentage sentiment of bullish or bearish price action. We have bullish price action of 57% of price action currently in Tilray. The one negative thing that we see is that the moving average has now been breached by the bearish sentiment, which appears to be creeping its way back down. It's only at 42%. This indicator generally can't go above 40%, or can't go above 60%, and it can't go below 40%. So even though we're looking at this as the reverse in terms of the bearishness really can't go below 42%. So we would expect it to try to get back to 50 because the market likes to be in equilibrium. We're going to go ahead and take a quick look at the weekly sentiment indicator here. It's the same thing we just looked at, but on weekly data. We can see it appears that we saw a bearish push here in September. That was probably a climax of selling. And then ever since then, we've essentially seen it rising up. It's now the moving average is about 50%. Bullish sentiment, it looks like, is at 57.9%, which is very high. But again, these indicators generally can't go above 60%. So you would expect to see at least a little reversion to the mean near the 50%, maybe even lower. So watch out there for what you're looking at inside of Riot. Looking at the volume, we can see obviously the biggest volume was around the peak. The peak in Riot in 2021 in February, you can see it coincides with the peak in volume. We've seen essentially volume falling. It does look like volume is rising a little bit recently, especially since the beginning of January. That's probably an indication of some buyers coming back into it. We'll go ahead and look at the volume on the daily. We can see the exact same thing. Essentially, we have the turn of the year here, where we see a significant move up in volume, which has continued recently into March. That's a positive signal for this bullish move. We're going to look at the volatility to price correlation. The red is price volatility, blue is correlation. So as we see the volatility rising and the correlation is positive, we would expect that price would continue to rise. Now, it does look like volatility is possibly cresting, which it generally does. It will generally do these kind of hills. Sometimes it can be bumpy like this. That's a little unusual, but a lot of times you're just going to see big cones and big like hills that look like that go up and then trend right down. We could be at the peak of this hill where it's going to start trending down. What we want to look for then would be correlation to start going negative, because if correlation is negative while volatility is falling, then price is going to rise. Let's look at this on the weekly. Essentially what we're looking at here is that volatility has essentially been falling since August of 2022. We got a little bit of a spike into the end of the year, and then volatility has essentially been falling. It looks like we've now bottomed, and volatility is going to start rising while we have correlation being negative. Now, that's not necessarily a great sign, because if correlation is negative and volatility is rising, then the price is going to go down on the weekly. This is actually more interesting because it gives you different opinions about what we would expect this stock to do. So in the short term, we'd expect it to go up. In the long term, we kind of expect it to go down. Let's go ahead and look at the non-sentiment trade range here for Riot. We can see that the volatility really drives the size of the range. So as the volatility is falling here, the range is getting much tighter. Essentially, we've seen a breakout to the top, which was, it looks like, I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it's somewhere around $9.16. The bottom is somewhere around $1.49. Probably won't get there, but you have to be very conscious. Now, looking at the daily non-sentiment trend range for Riot here, we can see that the volatility has significantly broken out, which again, you can see that when the volatility was low here in the beginning of March, the range got a little bit tighter, got a little bit more uniform, and then we saw a big explosion of volatility, which is higher than any other volatility that we've seen. We see how large and wide the mouth gets essentially on the range, which means that right now you could see a price all the way up to $11.54, or you could see a price all the way down to $4.48. I'm inclined to believe it's probably going to split the difference. You're probably going to come somewhere back down, probably around $7.50, just because that was a recent high. Could come back into this level here, somewhere in the mid or high sixes, and then probably continue on its bullish move up. But that's just the opinion of some guy on the internet. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Are you long? Are you short? Do you think this is a good investment? I'm not sure. I'm not putting any of my money into it, but I wish you nothing but the best if you're already in it and you just want to see this puppy go up or down. Have a great day.